Thank you.
You guys are good? Excellent.
These are. Here.
Yeah, you're fine there. I'm not going to be in two places at once. All right. You guys ready for a whiteboard class?
Oh,
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Better than a chalkboard.
Yes, much better than chalkboard. Anybody else still have like nightmares about chalk on a slate?
You couldn't get away with it.
Yeah. Okay. Good deal. Welcome, guys.
Yes, thank you.
This is probably my favorite class to do. You know, and if you've been here a while, like Pastor Beth has, you know, we basically do the same classes every year because when you teach laws and principles of health and healing, they don't actually change. And so it's just us that changes, right? So it's, you know, the same thing to refresh you guys, to keep you on target, on track. And, you know, the thing about this is too, I don't want everybody implementing everything all at once because that's overwhelming. It really is. It can be too much, especially if you're coming from standard American lifestyle, standard American diet, all this stuff. It takes time to implement this stuff successfully. So I want to teach you guys some of that. For those of you that are joining us online, welcome. We're going to be doing these classes about every month to 6 weeks, just depending on what it is. Next month, we're going to be covering cardiovascular health. It's your favorite, Sarah, right? Absolutely. I'm going to be talking about it from a prevention standpoint and what we can do holistically to get there. So my main goal with everything always is to teach you guys how to be healthy. How to be healthy. And so that has to start, number one, with knowing what health is. And so, right, when you came through for your doctor's report, we really emphasized hard this principle that health is not any function of how you feel. In fact, aiming at how you feel is selling yourself short because you're only going to end up at about 60% function feeling good. Function is health, though. And so if we're functioning well, then we are healthy. If we're not functioning well, we're approaching the opposite end of the spectrum, which is dead. And I don't want any of you guys to die. I want you to bury me, not the other way around, right?
That's right.
Right. So we want to aim for healthy. And so obviously the number one principle with this is that we have to have a healthy functioning central nervous system. If that's functioning well, then we're functioning. And we give ourselves the best chance to survive and thrive. And that's, you know, the basic principle of this. Number one, health comes from above, down, inside out. And we express it through the central nervous system. The intelligence that resides in our central nervous system starts in our brain, runs down the spinal cord, and out these nerves to every organ, cell, and tissue in your body. And so from that principle alone, if we were to cut all the nerves that go to your digestive system, does it matter if you listen to anything else I say tonight regarding nutrition? No, because your digestive system is going to stop. And so principle number one is make sure that we have a healthy functioning nervous system and then go from there. Now, if we do lose enough dysfunction in our central nervous system, these are some of the most common symptoms that you will feel, right? You have to get down that spectrum on the function chart, and then things like asthma start cropping up, or things like headaches, or menstrual problems, or high blood pressure, or depression, or insomnia, or numbness or tingling, or neck pain, or dizziness, or fatigue, or acid reflux, or sciatica, or low back pain. These are all signs of a poorly functioning body. But if we just address the symptom and never get to the function, we're never truly going to be healthy again. So the goal is get you fully healthy. And so when it comes to nutrition, we have to understand that the goal of everything that we put in our bodies should be to aid in this quest to get to 100% function.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, everything that you put in your mouth is black or white. It's either building function or it's taking it away. Every single thing you put in your mouth. There's not really a gray area here. It's either good for you or bad for you. It's either you're taking you towards function or away from function. Now we can nitpick and we can get into certain things, and certain things are good for some people and not good for others. Or I might recommend a whole fat organic dairy to one of you. That would be awful for me. I would be on the toilet all the rest of the night. And so there is gray in that. It doesn't apply equally to all of us in some of these finer points. But when we're focusing on function, we know that there is a black and there is a white. We just have to find out what that is. But that's kind of the point of life, is finding the truth, right? In all things, right? And as we seek the truth, it reveals itself to us, right? And truth with a capital T, not truth as we define it, right?
Amen.
Let's get there. So when it comes to all things health, but really nutrition, we have to start with some of these mental barriers, right? And these are common mental barriers that we have when it comes to health. And probably the number one barrier that we have is misinformation or conflicting information. And we even have conflicting science, don't we? You know, you look at enough research journals and you'll find science that disproves itself, right? You'll have one that conclusively shows that cholesterol causes heart disease, and one that conclusively shows that sugar causes heart disease. Is it one or is it the other? Is it both? I mean, come on. But so what we have to do with this is we have to interpret it in light of what we know God to have created, right? That comes first. If science goes against what God's saying, then science hasn't advanced enough to understand what God's doing. That's a right or down.
Yeah.
Right? If science doesn't agree with God, science hasn't advanced enough to understand what God is doing in the world. So we have to go to that source of truth first. Number two thing here is not wanting to feel deprived. I feel like I've had a couple conversations about deprivation in diet today. I don't remember who all I was with, but I do these consults all the time. And so, you know, you don't have to deprive yourself in order to eat healthy. And that's one of the things I want you guys to get out of this. It may feel like it sometimes, but just know there's a healthy alternative to what you want to have. Just might not be exactly what you want, right? Short-lived goals versus value. So like losing 10 pounds now to look good in the bikini for summertime, right? Versus losing that 10 pounds because I know that if I stay out of this obesity range, my immune system functions higher and I'm at far less risk of dying from something like COVID, right?
Yeah.
Those types of things. Budget concerns, it costs too much. The idea of, you know, spending the extra dollar on organic food when you're feeding a family of 5 versus spending the extra $100,000 on the cancer treatment down the road. And so knowing where your value lies within that decision. And then unsustainable diets. Anybody ever try keto? So keto is great short term, but not many people can sustain that for a long period of time and get healthy or stay healthy. It can get you healthy in a crisis, but long term, that's not a sustainable diet. That's not a creator's diet, right? That looks nothing like the Daniel diet, right? Or the diet that they had in the Garden of Eden, or the diet that they had coming off of the ark after the flood. And then past failures. Anybody ever try a diet and fail?
Yes.
Yeah. If it didn't work for you, it must not work, right? We got to overcome a little bit of that. So let's get into this. So first thing that we have to do is we have to figure out for ourselves how important is diet to us. How important is diet to you? And it's a quick and easy check. Go into your bank statement and look at how much you spend on diet, on nutrition, on groceries every single month. If it's valuable to you, you'll put time and money and effort into it. If it's not valuable to you, you'll see that. You know, does it reflect shopping at a store like Natural Grocers or Red Clover or Whole Foods, whole paycheck, right? Or is it McDonald's and Wendy's and Chick-fil-A? You know, where's your value? Is it about just being fast and easy? Oh, and then there's this exercise where you actually time out how fast it actually is to get fast food versus going and preparing it for yourself. Guess which one's faster? Preparing it for yourself is actually faster. It just feels more convenient because it's right there and they hand it to you ready while you're sitting in your car playing your cell phone, right?
Yeah.
Right? So again, it's about values. Where does your value lie? And so we have to start here with understanding where our culture currently is with this. And so when you look at the standard American diet, right? So standard American diet, acronym Sad, right? Because what you do consistently reveals itself over time and across the spectrum. The standard American diet has resulted in what? Standard American lifestyle, which is a diabetes lifestyle, an obesity lifestyle, an overweight lifestyle, a depleted immune system lifestyle, the least healthy country of all the industrialized nations in the world. What's going wrong? Well, with our diet, number one thing that we have going on is too much sugar. We consume that. The average American consumes 2/3 pounds of sugar a day. If you remove high fructose corn syrup from soda, now it's just 1/3 pound of sugar a day. So we're getting a lot of sugar from sodas. But then what's number 2 on that list is processed foods. Number 2 is too many toxins. And I don't want to misquote this, so I don't even say how much it is, but when you see the number of toxins in here, we just did the spring clean workshop about a month ago. It's ridiculous how many toxins we're exposed to and consume on a daily basis. Now, when it comes to our food supply, a lot of that's coming from the meats that we eat, the processed meats especially. And so we got to look at that. And then number 3 is that we don't get enough good fats in our diet. And a lot of that's due to the political decision that we made in the 50s and 60s to demonize fats to help lower heart attacks and heart disease. Did it work? No, it doesn't. And even a lot of the foods that are labeled as heart healthy are actually inflammatory and help create heart disease if done wrong. So we need to make sure that we get the right ideas when it comes to our diet. So we're going to change our diet. And these are principles that work on any diet. The number one thing that we have to do is clean up our carbs. If we're consuming 2/3 pounds of sugar a day, where should we be at with that? Well, and this is the average number, because it depends on your body size. It depends on your metabolism, but it should be about 30 grams of sugar a day. If you consume 30 grams of sugar a day, you're probably doing okay. And what that breaks down to is about 2 grams per hour. 2 grams per waking up, sorry. If you eat 2 grams per hour, that's 48. So let's do our math here for a second. So clean up our carbs first. And then recognize that there are good carbohydrates, but there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are not necessary for us to survive. Our body will create carbohydrates for us to survive and run those metabolic processes if we're deprived of those. Again, that's ketogenic. We're not getting into that tonight, but you can do that well. Second thing that we need to do is we need to fix our fats. The fats that we consume in the standard American diet are highly inflammatory. They're processed, they're denatured. So we need to go back to whole fats, fats that occur naturally without any processing, and really come in a whole food. Number 3 is we need to perfect our proteins. And we'll go into this a little bit more later, but the quality of our protein really determines how well our muscles build up, because muscle is ultimately built by proteins, or the amino acids that are in the proteins. Number 4 is we need to trash the toxins. If we're exposed to a bunch of them, then the number 1 principle of detox is to stop the exposure. So find those things that expose us the most and start to remove those from our diet. And then number 5, this is one that I added because I've dealt with it so much in my own life, and that's avoiding allergens. Avoiding those things that you're either sensitive to or allergic to, right? If you have a nut allergy and you consume nuts every day or peanut oil, it's gonna kill you, right? And the same is true with food sensitivities, but it responds differently. It starts attacking the gut lining, destroying your microbiome, and slowly over time, it leads to that dysfunction and disease. So you have to be very careful with food sensitivities as well. And the more I do this, the more I'm convinced that as many as 2/3 of our kids have unidentified food sensitivities, which is the reason why we have ADHD so prevalent in our society, or one of the many reasons why we have that, why we have increasing levels of autism and autism spectrum disorders, because there are unidentified food sensitivities that would never show up on an allergy panel because it's a different part of your immune system. It's a completely different molecule that responds to a food sensitivity than responds to an allergen. But it's still, if left there long enough, very, very dangerous to your system. For me, it was, the big one was dairy. And it took me a long time to come off of dairy. This is Havila, for those of you that haven't met Havila, my original office manager. And she's been with me on this journey the whole time. We pretty early figured out that dairy was probably not good for us. But the problem with food sensitivities is it creates addictive response. And so I was a pizza delivery guy for years. And guess what that meant? I ate a lot of pizza. And I didn't want to stop eating pizza. And so I felt like I would deprive myself if I didn't. And so gradually over time, I started to remove that food from my diet. Start with just going from 7 days a week to 5 days a week, then from 5 days a week to 3 days a week, and then from 3 days a week to picking 1 or 2 days on the weekends when I could have that. And then from picking 1 or 2 days on the weekend where I could have that Papa John's or Domino's or Little Caesars to now picking out the organic pizza with maybe the cauliflower crust, or getting the vegan pizza with the real bread. And then eventually I just started making it for myself, because the further away from the bad stuff I got, the better I felt. And then I would pay for it when I would go back into it. And so it was never depriving myself, right? It was just disciplining myself to make the right decision, even in the face of addiction. I had to do the same thing with ice cream. I had to move away from ice cream and do back that way down, because I'm just like my father-in-law. My wife married her father, right? Type of thing. So I wanted ice cream every single night, and part of it was that addiction to dairy. And so gradually I weaned myself off, and then I switched, and now I eat like oat milk ice cream or coconut ice cream, or I make my own ice cream with bananas and chocolate and just mixing it all up myself.
I've come to your house.
Yes, come to my house, right? No, I pride myself on making food taste good.
Yes, I know.
Even if it's healthy, it always tastes good. So let's address some myths. Let's start with the one about genetics. So who knows the statistic on genetics? What percentage of things that kill us are actually due to genetics? Statistically, scientifically, research-wise. Is it, what do you think, 20%? Higher or lower? 10%? Yeah, that's actually really good. Less than 5% of all the diseases that kill us are actually due to our genes. Now that you really have to have an understanding of what epigenetics is to truly grasp those numbers, because you can be born with a gene that makes it more likely that you develop breast cancer. And you can be born with a gene that makes it more likely that you have heart disease. But the gene has an on-off switch that is turned on by the environment. If you live in an environment that's highly inflammatory, you eat lots of sugars, lots of denatured fats, guess what that does to those genes for breast cancer and heart disease? It flips them on, and it makes it more likely for it to express itself. And so this absolutely becomes untrue. Your genes are the bullet, but your lifestyle is the trigger on the gun. You can have the bullet, but it doesn't make it deadly unless you actually load it into the gun and pull the trigger. Let's not load the gun anymore. What are those things that do that? Number one is going to be inflammation. Inflammation is caused, number one, by too much sugar. It elevates your blood glucose levels, which in turn elevates your insulin, which is fine if you do it once, right? Sometimes I will actually still have a pint of ice cream.
At one crack?
Yeah, all at once. I've done it for it before. Yeah, right? Yeah, I will definitely take it out. Like, and I was a food eating champion too. Like, I can knock food down, and I will. But if I do that consistently over time, that's where it becomes a problem. That's where you develop pre-diabetes and then diabetes, right? It's when that's too high for too long and you don't give yourself a respite. If you go from that pint of ice cream, even if you only eat half of it, and then you go to a pizza, which the bread in it turns to sugar right away, and then you go to Krispy Kreme, and then you go to, I'm just naming it, go down the list. It stays there. And that just sounds like the standard day for our teenagers, right? I mean, I remember my teenage years. I'm sure it's not that much different than the friends I was eating with. Damaged fats. So the thing about fats is that every cell in your body is surrounded by a layer of fat. It's called a phospholipid membrane. Phospholipid bilayer. It's your cell membrane. And it is really more intelligent than the nucleus of the cell, because it's the thing that decides what gets in and what gets out of your cell. It's the one that responds to the environment. And so if you don't get enough healthy fats into that membrane, those membranes get depleted, they get inflamed. It's like wrapping the cell in saran wrap. Now you can't get things in there because that saran wrap creates a seal, and then the cell starts breaking down. And it has to create an environment where it can live. This is part of that process of actually creating cancer. You know, it goes from not being able to do its simple processes to starting to try to create an environment where it can, to then becoming a cancer cell, because now you've turned off the gene that actually creates apoptosis, which is cell death. You want a cell to die and then recreate itself later. Cancer cells don't. Toxins also create inflammation. You expose yourself to too much arsenic, your body gets all inflamed and you start dying. Lead, cadmium, mercury, go on down the line. Aluminum, eventually. Ever put aluminum in your brain? Unfortunately, way too often. It's in just about everything. Your cookware, your antiperspirants, I mean, you go down the list, it gets in there. And then sensitivities and allergies, you get too much of those in your gut, it starts becoming inflamed. It creates a systemic inflammation. So we have to look at those sources of inflammation. So again, establish a value system. Over 90% of our diseases are created by lifestyle habits, most of which are due to inflammation. So we also have to create this environment that we're impacting others, right? When we let our own light shine, that's when we give others the permission to do the same, right? And Marianne Williamson, straight out of the Bible almost, right? Yeah, exactly. So your actions speak so loudly that I cannot hear what you're saying. Yeah. Or another way to say it, Saint Francis of Assisi, everywhere you go, preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. The good news isn't just that Jesus came to die on the cross and be raised from the dead so that we could have eternal life through the Father. It was also this having the life to the full. And life to the full doesn't mean setting our health aside. It doesn't mean dying of disease via diabetes or heart disease or cancer. It's everything to the full. So getting back to the garden. So let's take it on another method. Anybody think that counting calories is an effective way to healthy nutrition? Well, when 22 almonds equals 153 calories, and one Twinkie is 150 calories, by this thought process, this would be the healthier option.
3 calories.
Yeah, 3 calories. But it's not true, right? Why? Because this has so many more nutrients in it. We need to be eating to live, not living to eat. This might feel better in the moment, but what's actually going to make you healthier?
Yeah.
So long as you're not allergic to nuts,
Yes.
this has way more nutrients in it. Right? So we need to be making choices in our foods based off of what's actually in there to sustain life. Can you make almonds taste good? Absolutely. Can you do it without coating it in like cake and whipped cream? Yes, you can. Sometimes you coat it in chocolate. Sometimes you coat it in cinnamon. Sometimes you coat it in salty splits. It doesn't matter. You can make good stuff taste good, or taste like it's bad for you, right? Even without making it bad. So we talked about how much sugar we're getting in the standard American diet. But what does that actually do? Well, other than actually doing the thing where it elevates your insulin and your blood glucose levels and eventually giving you diabetes, it also creates inflammation systemically. One of my favorite exercises to do, and I wish I had a sugar packet, I probably do it back somewhere, is to take a packet of sugar and put it in your mouth and then check to see how strong you are. And just by putting 2 grams of sugar in your mouth, you will lose strength. I can test your strength before and afterwards you're weaker. Just by having sugar in your mouth, not even swallowing.
How about if you swallow it?
What do you think that does?
She's only 10.
Yeah.
Fives.
Yeah, just
sugar,
put them in your coffee or put them straight down.
Taking it straight.
Yeah, it's not good for you. So what's worse than sugar though? Well, anything that tricks your body into thinking it's sugar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is where a lot of the American Diabetes Association has got it wrong, because they take things like sorbitol and Splenda, and they take even aspartame, and your body still thinks it's sugar. It has so similar a molecular chain that it tricks your body into responding the exact same way. So even though your blood sugar doesn't necessarily spike, putting this in your mouth, guess what does? Your insulin levels. Can you have diabetes without high blood sugar? Yeah, if you have way too high of blood insulin levels. And so we need to have a safer alternative to that. So natural is better, natural sweeteners, but stevia is my go-to. Second place would be monk fruit sweetener. There's some others that you go to, but when you're looking to avoid sugar in the inflammatory response and the insulin response, stevia is probably your best bet. So long as you don't actually have an allergy or sensitivity to it, that's the best bet. And the reason why is because it's an herbal sweetener, 500 times sweeter than sugar, so you don't need as much. You can actually cut it with other things like erythritol or just, filler, and it does much better on your body, hormonally and inflammation. So that's a great place to start. Some people ask about honey, some people ask about maple syrup, some people ask about coconut palm sugar, and my answer is pretty much the same for all of those. They have different levels of glycemic index. Some are higher up than others. Honey is pure fructose. Maple syrup is pure fructose, or pretty much pure fructose in both of those cases. But in both cases, they also come with other things that make them beneficial for you. And so while not a gray area, because they're definitely taking you this way down the chain, it's a step in the right direction from purely refined table sugar. If you were to get something like sugar cane, raw sugar cane, like the whole stick, and you chewed on that, that would be fine. If you wanted to stir that into your coffee, that would be fine, because you wouldn't be getting much actual sugar in there, because the fiber in that sugar cane would protect you from the sugar. Same thing is true of honey. If you were to go try to get a piece of honeycomb, the bees would attack you, and you wouldn't get very much honeycomb, would you? Right? We're not designed to eat a lot of this stuff. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve weren't spooning sugar into their mouth, or into their coffee, or into their soda, or taking corn and refining it down to corn syrup and putting it into their soda. So that's one of the major things that we have to think about when we come to this. You take a stevia leaf off of a stevia plant and you drop it in your tea, guess what happens to the tea? It gets sweet. You didn't have to process it. Do we process it for easier consumption? Yes, and there are better ways to do that and worse ways to do that. If you pick up your stevia packet and it says dextrose is the first ingredient, it's probably not stevia, right? There are stevias out there that are not actually stevia. They have stevia in them. It doesn't mean it's actually stevia. So look at the back, read the ingredients. Next, fat makes you fat. Anybody here, you are what you eat? Yeah, and that's somewhat true. But fat doesn't necessarily make you fat. Fat makes you full. There are more calories in a gram of fat than there are in a gram of sugar. But you can eat fat, right? The ketogenic diet, lots of people lose fat and body weight eating the ketogenic diet. Fat doesn't make you fat. Too much of anything is really what will break you down and make you fat. So there's good fats and there's bad fats. So bad fats are processed. All this text basically means processed. So these are the things that you want to be looking for on an ingredients list. If you turn it around and it's like a butter replacement and it has these things in there, then it's not healthy for you. But if you turn it around and it says this stuff on it, it's going to be much better for you. Right? The closer we get to the actual food it came from, the healthier that fat's going to be for you. And the less likely it is to make you fat because it's coming in its right environment. Right? God designed this world to sustain life forever in the Garden of Eden. We're the ones that destroyed it. We're the ones that denatured it. And then we went ahead and tried to make it more easy and comfortable for us. And so we started to take things like olives and make olive oil. And that one step wasn't so bad. You don't respond badly to olive oil. Most of the diets in the world that are shown to be good for you, extra virgin olive oil is a major part of that. But we take it a step further and we refine it down further so we can get more out of that olive. Now that becomes more denatured. We put it in a clear bottle instead of a dark bottle. Now the light starts to denature that further. We cook it in a pan, heat it up, that denatures that further. Then we take some of these other things like vegetables. Vegetables are full of fats, right? No, yeah, not really. You're thinking of spinach or lettuce, not very full of fat. So they take some of these things and they put them like corn oil, right? How much fat does corn have in it? Put a whole tub of that, right? The whole big bottle of that. How much corn did you have to refine to get down to that bottle of corn oil? Probably this much, maybe more, right? Yeah. So let's be smart about this. And then, like, is any synthetic fat actually going to be as good for you as the fat that God made for you? Like really, are we smarter than you? No, we're not. So let's go to the real fats first. So, next one. Fat and meats causes heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis, and kidney disease. This is one of these half-truths. Absolutely, it can. But really the problem isn't the meat or the fat in meats, it's conventional meat. The way that our meats are raised. Anybody think that a fish was designed to be raised in a farm and fed corn pellets? Is that what God intended? No, and we see when we actually look inside that fish, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids is way off. But when you get wild caught salmon, it's one of the most omega-3 rich foods on the planet. So healthy. Now you throw it in a farm. Just denatures it. And so you look at countries, right? And there's a tribe in Africa, and I forget the name of the tribe offhand, but they live off of meat and dairy. It's the only thing they do. It's a desert tribe, but they raise cows. And all they do is they live off of the dairy, and then they eat the cows that, as they're getting ready to die. And they have a non-existent cancer and heart disease. They're doing fine with that diet. They've adapted to that diet, and they have other problems as well, given that they live in the desert, right?
Yeah.
But they do really well, and cancer and heart disease are not part of the equation for them. But the problem is those, when we raise cows on a dirt lot and just feed them corn all the time, it's nature. They get the omega-6 to omega-3 ratios completely off. So the first thing, if you're going to change anything, if you change nothing, you want to change something, like change your animal products first. So what does that look like? Number one, beef. If you're going to do beef, get it grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, not just grass-fed, 100% grass-fed. If it just says grass-fed, it only has to be 80% grass-fed in order to qualify for the label grass-fed. So 100%. For chicken, you want a free range. Chickens are not designed to be raised in a box. When you raise them in a box, they don't even know what to do when they get outside. But when they're raised to be outside, they start grubbing for bugs. They get access to sunshine and fresh air, and you can taste the difference. Same thing with eggs, right?
Yeah.
We had this conversation. When you eat an egg that comes off of a farm, guess what color the yolk is?
Yeah.
Dark orange.
Yes.
And it's so good. Like I lick it off the plate still in my late 30s.
I've seen it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's not bad for you, right? It's not really comfort, right? Wild caught fish, right? Ideally not bottom feeders and ideally not predator fish
Yes.
because of toxic accumulation in those. So things like salmon and sardines are much better for you than tuna or shrimp would be. So I know shrimp is everybody's favorite.
Oh.
And then for your dairy, just get a natural source, and don't trust the natural label on a label because it means nothing. Nobody's monitoring that to make sure it's actually coming from a farm that way. Know where it's coming from. Natural means grass-fed. They get access to the outdoor and pasture and all this stuff. Because when they do that, it matters way more than even the organic label does. Because guess what organic means? It just means that they got organic feed. That's all it means. And
So that's not a big deal.
yeah, organic beef, it's only 50% grass-fed. So they can do that for the first half of its life and then just switch to organic corn. And its omega-6 and omega-3 ratio is off, and it leads to more inflammation. So this matters way more than the organic label does. Now in a pinch, will I choose organic over conventional?
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's a step in the right direction. So there's always more steps that we can take down this path, and we can get more specific depending on who you are and what your accommodations can be. Now, another myth is that we need 5 to 8 servings of grains every day for a healthy diet. What's the big consideration with grains? What do they tell you need to get from your grains? Fiber. Fiber is the big thing. That's the reason why they're telling you to get the grains. They say make half your grains whole. Guess where you get most of your fiber from if you cut the grains out? Vegetables, exactly. Guess what has more fiber in it than a grain? Things like spinach, things like kale, things like cauliflower, things like broccoli, all the things that we love as children. Yeah, so easy to get us to eat. Now, my kids actually still love broccoli because we introduced it first before adding those grains in.
Oh,
Yeah, when you add in those vegetables first, They respond better, even before fruits. We had vegetables first. I guess the only fruit we really introduced early was avocado. You know, it wasn't a sweet fruit. And so they didn't develop the sweet tooth like I did and really set myself up for a difficult time because I had my candy, I had my sugar. So, you know, getting them the whole vegetables, you know, just make such a difference. Cholesterol causes heart disease. This is another myth, right? Probably one that you might even teach to your patients sometimes. It's not cholesterol, and actually dietary cholesterol has very low impact on serum cholesterol, your blood cholesterol. It's the oxidation of cholesterol that becomes the problem. It's when cholesterol meets inflammation that it starts to form that hard plaque that it becomes a problem. So yes, maybe Joe Blow out there who doesn't eat right, doesn't exercise, doesn't get chiropractic care, doesn't even know what a toxin is, if it smacked him in the face and told him he was getting toxic exposure, if he ate something that was full of cholesterol, it might increase his risk of heart disease. But if you're eating right and exercising, and you happen to eat something like an egg that has cholesterol in it, guess what? It doesn't impact your cholesterol score at all. So we need to make sure, because cholesterol is actually something that's necessary for us. That's why your liver produces most of the cholesterol that's in your blood. Guess what a statin does? It doesn't remove cholesterol from your digestive tract. It removes it inside the liver as it's being produced. It blocks your liver from being able to produce it. So your body is actually the one that's producing the cholesterol. And we need to figure out why it's elevating if it's high. Not just block it from elevating. What's it doing? Well, in general, cholesterol is actually a wound healing mechanism, a wound healing component. If you look at a scab, what's it mostly made of? Cholesterol. Guess what happens when you have high inflammation in the arteries of the heart? Well, it starts to plaque, just like a wound would, because it's actually wounding it. You have high inflammation in an artery, the artery walls start to be damaged. They start to harden, even if cholesterol doesn't start to go there. So don't be afraid of cholesterol. Make sure it's coming from a good source. Make sure you're doing all the right things with it. Now, this one, some people have trouble with. There are a lot of people that actually trust the government. I'm not one of them. And part of the reason is I've actually read a lot of the research out there from the FDA and USDA, and I see them contradicting themselves all the time, changing what they're saying. And it's one thing as things are revealed, but to have two statements out there simultaneously and not change either one, that really makes me question what they're saying about things. And you look at who produced the MyPlate, the US food pyramid. USDA did. Guess what that's in the shape of? The money that's contributed, the money that's lobbied. Who's in control of the FDA? Who's the head of the FDA right now? A former CEO of a drug company. Who was the head of the FDA before him? A different former CEO or executive from a drug company. Guess who was before that? Another one. And guess where they're employed now? The former ones. At a drug company.
Yes.
As executives or board members. So there's a huge financial incentive. I'm not saying that they're out there to hurt you. Yeah. It doesn't have to be us trying to hurt each other for something to be wrong, right? Yeah. But there's incentive for them to make sure that they're giving their buddies a good time, so there's a job on the other side. And so it's, you just look at all the exposures that we get. I mean, just in our food supply alone, we have all these genetically modified organisms, which they tell you the idea behind genetically modified organisms is to get you more food at a cheaper price. And you see that in the grocery store, right? The foods that are conventionally grown are cheaper. But why is it genetically modified? So that it can hold more pesticides and not die. That's the main point of genetically modifying food. So they can spray more pesticides out. Guess what pesticides do when you build up too much in the human body? They start to create cancer. They start to create a toxic reaction. And so we have to know what's being added to our foods. Number one thing I would say to change with this is actually get on the Environmental Working Group's website and look at the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen are the top 12 foods that have the most pesticide exposure in their production. The Clean 15 are the 15 foods that have the least pesticide exposure, and that changes every year. So 2021 is different than 2020. But there's some foods that stay the same every year. And guess what they are? Your favorite ones.
Mhm.
So strawberries, yeah, corn, sweet corn. Name another favorite food. I'll tell you if it's on the list. Tomatoes.
Yes,
Yeah, that's on the list.
celery or something like that.
Yeah, apples
Mhm.
on the list. It's all of our favorite foods because they want to produce more of those. And so they end up changing them at a genetic level so that they can survive more pesticide spray. And so look at those lists, look at them every single year, and depending on your budget, where you're at with it. If you're very tight on finances, start with your meat products first. Go back to that list, change those because that actually has more pesticide exposure in your meats. If you're vegan, or if that's not as much of one, then step into the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. Start by getting all the things on the Dirty Dozen as organic, if you're going to get them. Then if you want to take things that aren't listed at all, that would be your next step. Those are the ones that get organic. And the last ones to change would be that Clean 15 because they have less pesticides on them. And then even overarching over all of that, if you get fruit in season, organic or non-organic, in season fruits and vegetables have less pesticides than out of season fruits and vegetables, regardless of Dirty Dozen or Clean 15. So get it in season first. Another myth, eating healthy is boring, tasteless, and too hard to do. And I'll tell you that one's not true. Good food is good if you know how to prepare it. And some people are like, oh, I'm just so overwhelmed, I don't know how to cook. Learn. If it's something worth doing, it's worth doing well. And eating is absolutely one of these things. So just take the time and align your health book, right? In the back of this are some really good recipes. And you know, even my wife, or I should say especially my wife, since she has a master's degree, you know, she can make these things and they're delicious and you just follow the steps. I mean, some of them are slightly harder than others. So start with the stuff that's easy, right? Start with stuff you want to eat first, right? If you know you like that recipe or you know you like that, you know, thing, then make that first and then make it taste good. And my key to making food taste good is try it while I'm making it and don't finish until it tastes good, right? Just keep trying it. If you don't try it along the way, you could get to the end and it could stink because that second step, you did too much salt or not enough something else and you just missed it. So, yeah. Try. And I do that even with like, if I'm baking with brownies and stuff. And I know everybody's afraid of like raw eggs and whatever. But yeah, no, my immune system can handle a little salmonella. Another one. I don't need to take supplements because I can get an adequate amount of every nutrient from diet alone. And I think in the Garden of Eden, this was true. And I think after the Garden of Eden, this was also true. But I think once the flood hit and our environment changed, that it has no longer stayed true. I think that's part of the reason why God said that you can eat animals, because he knew that there was much more nutrient density in meat than there was in fruits and vegetables. And so, but you just look at the foods that we're eating now compared to like the 1930s. There's less than 50% of things like vitamin C and a head of broccoli than there was in the 1930s. Less than 50%. And that's because our soil's been depleted because of our farming practices. And so we do have to supplement. We do have to supplement a lot of things. So which things? Which things? So, calcium. Now we don't, this is one that I think that we actually over supplement or we supplement with wrong because we just give people calcium without factoring in the other things. It needs to work synergistically with a lot of micronutrients, but specifically vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. If you're going to supplement with calcium because you're worried about osteoporosis, make sure that you're getting it in conjunction with D3 and K2. Otherwise, you'll set yourself up for heart problems. You get too much blood calcium, throw off that calcium potassium pump in your heart. Vitamin D, this one we really miss out on is because we're working inside all the time. This is not a food supplement. This is not a food nutrient. This is actually a sunshine nutrient. If you get outside, complete exposure for 30 minutes a day in the summertime, you're getting enough. How many of us do that? I don't, lay out in my bikini for 30 minutes every day, right?
No.
Well, and then we live in Nebraska because, so during winter months, it doesn't work even if you go outside fully exposed. You know, not that you could survive -30 this year, but during the winter, we need to supplement with vitamin D3. It's not a question. How much should you take? About 5,000 IUs a day. A little more, a little less, depending on your energy expenditure, but it's a fat soluble vitamin. So long as you're getting the food source of it, right? Things like salmon are great, wild caught salmon are actually a pretty good source for that supplementation because it's a fat soluble vitamin. And if you're getting that wild caught, it's getting into its fat cells and then it becomes a healthy source of D3 for you. So about 5,000 IUs a day. That's one of our capsules, if you're wondering about what we're taking. Iron's another one. See, a lot of people are iron depleted. Maybe not so much that they're being diagnosed with it, but a lot of people are missing iron. Another one is vitamin B12, especially for people that are vegans and vegetarians. They miss out on vitamin B12 because it's not available in plants. It's available in seafood. And so if you're eating kelp, seaweed, you can actually get it from the seaweed. But a lot of people are missing out on it, even because they're not eating real food. Eggs are a great source of vitamin B12. So provided you're not vegan, you can go right there. Folate, that's another B vitamin, not folic acid. Folic acid is a synthetic version. If you have the MTHFR genetic mutation, you're sensitive to vitamin B12. An easy sign to know if you're vitamin B12 or if you're MTHFR, it's not 1-to-1, it's not 100%, but it's a good sign, is if you have the triangle, was that surf bite on the back of your neck?
Mhm.
That's a good sign that you might be MTHFR genetic mutation. You're more likely to be sensitive to gluten as well. You're more likely to have a reaction to a vaccine if you have the MTHFR genetic mutation. Next one here is magnesium. This is one, like if you have cramps, you're probably deficient in either potassium or magnesium. So those are my go-tos with that. Now, all of these things are plentiful, except for maybe vitamin D3 in spinach. So if you eat more spinach, you're going to get access to a lot of these things. But something that I do every single day is I take this. The reason why I take this is it has all of those things in there. And what this is our daily essentials packet. It comes with the multivitamin first. Take a picture of this. It comes with the multivitamin, which is formulated for either men or women. And then, right, so it has enough for me to survive with just that. So if you're wanting to start with one thing and not do everything, start with the multivitamin. But then it also has my D3. It has my B complex. It has my omega, and it has my magnesium in there. And I don't miss a day with these. If I do, it's because I just forgot to eat that thing, right? So these are an everyday thing for me. I don't stop with that. So all supplements are 15% off tonight. That's one of the benefits of coming to these classes. You get to stock up at an additional discount. So make sure you're getting in line for those on your way out. So then we go into nutrient plans, because I do really want you to get as many nutrients as you can from what you're eating. And if you look at your book, in the back, Appendix A and Appendix B have your nutrition plans. The first one in Appendix A is your core plan. The core plan is nutrition for healthy families. The basic rule with this is if God made it, eat it. If man made it, leave it. You're eating God foods.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not counting your calories, you're not counting your carbs, you're not counting your fats, you're just eating real food. You can prepare it, you can mix it up, you can do the chemistry with it. Some things are more bioavailable when you cook it than when they're raw. Some things are more bioavailable when they're raw than when you cook it. Mix it up, get some variety. But Appendix A kind of goes through those things that make this easier, right? Some more details in the shopping list for you. Appendix B, that's your advanced plan. Advanced plan is for healing. If you need to heal from something, whether it's an autoimmune condition or an arthritic condition or joint repair, the advanced plan gets you there faster. Number one, it helps with that hormone repair. It actually helps you to overcome weight loss resistance. Number two, it decreases inflammation systemically, helps you manage diseases just with the diet alone. It accelerates that weight loss, and its goal is complete health restoration. It's very similar to like a paleo or a ketogenic diet. But if you look on your second sheet of paper that I gave you, the big, landscape-oriented sheet, it goes through and it compares different aspects of the advanced plan, the core plan, to things like keto and paleo and the whole 30, some of the more popular diets that are out there. And it shows you where the gaps in those diets are that the advanced plan and the core plan hit, right? So biblical diet and then advanced short-term for healing. And most people do need to go on somewhere between 30 and 90 following the advanced plan. So let's get into what that looks like real quick. The advanced plan, number one, is you change three things: sugar and carbs. We eliminate grains, we eliminate any added sugars, and we're eliminating fruit except for those low glycemic fruit: berries, grapefruit, Granny Smith apples. Those are your big three. Those are the lowest glycemic fruits out there. Even healthy grains rapidly turn to sugar. So we're trying to eliminate sugar short term. Cut that addiction to sugar. Number two, protein. We're replacing all the conventional protein sources with the natural protein sources. That doesn't require supplementation, but it can be helped by supplementation. And then number three, with fats, we're taking out the bad fats and we're replacing them with good things. You do those three things consistently every day for 1 to 3 months, you'll revolutionize what you're doing inside with your hormones. People that reverse chronic diseases in this office do it because they went on the advanced plan for 1 to 3 months. That's where we start. Foods to avoid on the advanced plan. Things contain processed carbohydrates and sugars. Things with sugar substitutes, even things made with stevia or some of the sugar alcohols, can be inflammatory when it's processed like that. Trans fats, really got to watch out for the trans fat. It's becoming less and less because the FDA stopped approving trans fat foods about 2 years ago. But if it was on the shelves, right, and some canned foods, some foods that were jarred and have a long shelf life, still have trans fats in there. So watch out for those. Foods that contain fats that turn rancid. So like if it contains olive oil and it's in a clear jar, that olive oil is sensitive to light and it can break it down, it can denature it if it's left there for too long. Any type of highly processed foods. And so really, when you're looking at your ingredient list, if it's got 3 ingredients or less, it's probably safe, provided one of those isn't sugar, right? Right? Provided one of those isn't a denatured fat already. You're setting yourself up on a good fat. Shopping, you really have to set yourself up for success. I have so many patients that have food addictions. And the number one thing I tell them is don't keep it in your house. If I have ice cream in my house, guess what's happening to it? It's getting what should happen to it. You can throw it in the trash. But I have such a strong addiction to it that I cannot mentally, emotionally, maybe even spiritually overcome that, because there are moments of weakness where my willpower is overcome. All right? So we have to plan ahead. You win the battle in the grocery store.
Yes.
Make a list. Check it twice. Right? Take that list with you. Keep the basic stock for meals on the fly. What do I always keep in my kitchen? I always have chicken broth. It makes everything taste better. Not everything. It doesn't go so well in oatmeal, right? Most things. Spend more time planning and shopping than actually cooking. Guess what's a great tool for this? Crock pot, Instapot, air fryer, things that cook things either quickly or that you don't have to actively be there watching it for. Now, I prefer to be there so I can taste it along the way and season it as I need it. But those are great things that have a lot of recipes out there that you can do a lot of this stuff with. Read the labels. The first couple of times I started shopping this way, the shopping guide, right? Navigating the grocery store, Appendix C. It took me a couple hours to get through the grocery store because I was reading everything. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I was eating this. I was just walking through Trader Joe's assuming everything was healthy for me because it's Trader Joe's. Walking through Whole Foods assuming everything was healthy for me because it's Whole Foods. Come to find out, even things that are labeled organic and green, not all of them are healthy for you. So we need to make sure that we're reading those labels and then use the pesticide there. Really look at that. Look to see what your foods are being sprayed with. So what do we do when we're reading labels? So don't look at the fat content. Don't look at the carb content. Don't look at the protein content. Do look at the ingredients list. I even do this with supplements. honestly, I don't care what herbs are in there. I don't care which vitamins are in there. I care more about what fillers are in there. If you get a protein and the first ingredient is maltodextrin, think that's a good protein? What is maltodextrin? Corn sugar. Corn, but corn sugar specifically. So yeah, look at that ingredient list. That's the main thing. Don't look at the front label and assume anything's healthy. I've done that. Like even recently I've done that. I'm like, oh, look at this. It's my favorite thing. And they changed the recipe. I just trusted the front label and didn't turn it around and look. So occasionally check, even on the good foods. But it's more important to just get real whole foods. Make it yourself. Much better. And then just some healthy tips that help with this. Number one, establish your big why. Why are you doing this? Is it because you do want to be on the beach with your grandkids when you're in your 80s? For me, I want to be playing basketball in my 80s. Maybe that's not the same for most of you. I want to be playing basketball with my great grandkids, showing them a thing or two about what grandpa can do on the basketball court in my 80s. To do that, I'm going to have to do things way different than most Americans are doing. But you think Moses was able to do a few things at the age of 80 when he had to go before Pharaoh? Yeah, absolutely. He was doing way better than us nutritionally. And it wasn't just because he was a shepherd, right? Start thinking of food as fuel and sustenance, not just something that makes me feel good, not just something to meet a craving. Add more healthy, nutrient-dense options. So this is actually a great way to start. Instead of starting to take out the bad foods, start by adding the good foods. Don't allow yourself to eat that candy bar or the ice cream or the pizza until first you've had 5 servings of vegetables, a big salad, right? Eat a big salad first and then go to that thing. That's what you're going to do with that thing that you know is not healthier for you. You eat less of it because you're more full. If it has more nutrients in it, you're not going to need as much. Then take away the unhealthy items. Start looking at those things that you need to replace and put those things on a schedule, like I was talking about. Go from 7 days a week to 5 days a week, or from 5 days a week to 3 days a week, and from 3 days a week to 2 or 1 day a week, and then eventually start to replace that thing. And don't just take it away, but replace it with something that's either just as good or is the same thing, just with healthier ingredients. My favorite chocolate cake recipe is one of the healthiest recipes I have. I love it. If you want my recipe, I'll give it to you. It's fantastic and it's healthy. Spend that time planning and shopping, and then keep a food journal. I have food journals available if you want to walk out of here today with one. I'll hand you one on the way out. Just track yourself for a week. Actually look at what you put in your mouth. Be honest with yourself. Don't not write it down just because you just did it once. Like actually write that down, because if you just did it once this week, that's what you did last week and the week before. You just did it once then, and now it's becoming a habit, and you're reinforcing that habit over time. So we're going to keep doing these. We're going to keep doing these classes. Like I said, next month, we're going to be talking about cardiovascular health as a whole, how to prevent this thing really, not just treat it, right? We don't want to wait until we feel it. What does that end up with heart disease? A heart attack, right? 50% of the time. So we're going to do these on a monthly basis, but we need our friends here, right? If we're going to make an impact on this community more than just ourselves, we have to invite friends to join us here. And so we're going to do a community dinner next month. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but look for it. When the sign-up sheet's out there, start asking your friends about if they're available that evening. Bring them in. I'll feed you guys salad. I'll give you delicious tasting chicken and salad dressing, and it'll be a good time. There'll be a bottle of wine on the table if you like to do that on Tuesday night. But it's for your friends, because ultimately this is about making an impact on our community. It's not just about making an impact here, because this only goes until God calls me home, right? It's about making an impact on more people than just this. And I love that. I get to be a part of that, and I want you to be able to participate with me there. And some people might say, well, it's too much. It's too much to ask all these people to make that much change in life. And yes, it is. So I say start with one. Right? You guys have heard the story of the little boy throwing the starfish into the ocean. Old man comes up and he says, "What are you doing?" There's a beach full of starfish. He says, they're all going to die. You're not going to make a difference. And the little boy picks it up and throws one in and said, "I made a difference for that one."
Yes.
And you never know how far reaching something you think, say, or do today will last beyond here. It may be into eternity.
Amen.
And so if you have friends or family that need to be here, absolutely tell them about what we're doing. Tell them about what you're learning. If you're excited about it, they're going to be excited for you, even if they're not excited for themselves yet. How many times did it take my mom's best friend telling her to get me to a chiropractor before a chiropractor saved my life? 7 times. 7 times. And they may not be ready to hear it today, and they may not be ready to hear it tomorrow. But God's going to work on them, just like I work on them, right?
Yes, amen.
It takes time. So keep working on it. Stick around, ask me your questions. I'm going to turn off the Facebook and start checking people out for their supplements, because I know some of you guys are here for that discount. I think Pastor Bev's got an announcement about the prayer group that we've got going.
Yes. I wanted to tell you that since, let's see, I looked at it, the 2nd of March, we have got 24 people signed up to pray for this young man and the ministry that God has for him.